It started on a Thursday, 3 minutes past 8, the exact time the first bottle of red was opened and someone dropped their coat too close to the candles. Our living room wasn't built for a crowd, but it didn't matter. People kept pouring in like it was their house and they'd been living here all along. Voices bounced off the walls. Perfume clung to the air like a desperate lie. She was laughing in the kitchen, surrounded by people who'd rather drown in gin than silence. Her laugh used to be my favorite sound. Now it just made me feel like I was listening in on something I was never meant to hear. They brought a cake from some overpriced bakery downtown, the kind with gold dust on the frosting and a name that sounded like a cologne. Everyone stood in a half-circle, wine glasses in hand, clapping as she blew out the candles, but there was no warmth in it. The room applauded like a synchronized performance. They weren't celebrating her. They were performing for each other. Then he arrived. Nathan Cole. Not late. Not early. Right on time, like a man who enjoys being noticed for his punctuality. He wore navy, tailored too tight across the chest, shoes that caught the light like polished bone. He moved like he'd already won. He didn't greet anyone else, just walked straight to her, leaned in close, said something too low for anyone else to hear. She froze, just for a second, before she forced that synthetic smile and kissed him on the cheek. I saw it. It wasn't what he said. It was how she reacted, like he held something over her, like she didn't want to owe him a favor, but already did. I asked her about it later, casually, while clearing glasses from the coffee table. She said, "That's just how he is. Nathan's a creep, but he signs my paychecks." She didn't meet my eyes when she said it. I asked what he said when he leaned in. She paused just long enough to make it a lie. Said I looked good in that dress. Then she disappeared to help in the kitchen. There was no one in the kitchen. That was the first thread, and it started unraveling fast. Later that night, when the cake was nothing but crumbs and the laughter had softened into half-hearted goodbyes, Nathan pulled out a box from under the side table like it had been waiting there the whole time. The wrapping was sleek, not festive, not thoughtful, sleek. The way you wrap something that isn't really a gift, just a reminder. He held it up. "Didn't get the chance to give this earlier," he said, loud enough for everyone to turn. Bit of a personal touch. She smiled, practiced and stiff, but didn't move to take it. So he stepped forward and handed it to her himself. People laughed, mostly to fill the air. But as she peeled the ribbon away, the room grew quieter. I don't know if anyone else noticed. Maybe they did. Maybe they were pretending not to. Her hands hesitated when the paper fell. She opened the box. I watched her face change in slow motion. Not confusion. Not surprise. Fear. Real, raw chemical fear. She didn't say anything. She just dropped the box, not by accident. Not a slip. She let it fall like it had hurt her. Like it was radioactive. Silence. Nathan smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile you give when someone likes your gift. It was the kind you give when you remind someone what they owe you. She looked at me. Just for a second. Eyes wide. Guilt, panic, rage all mashed together in a glance that barely lasted long enough to register. I didn't ask what was in the box. Not then. Because that box, whatever it was, had answered a question I hadn't even asked out loud yet. She was hiding something. And it had just hit the floor. She muttered something about being tired. Said she was going to bed early. People cleared out fast after that, like animals running from an unseen fire. Nathan didn't say goodbye to me. He just looked at me, nodded once, and left like he'd just finished something important. I stood in the kitchen alone after the door closed behind the last guest. The box still lay there, unopened, its contents half hidden beneath torn paper and tension so thick it buzzed in my ears. And in that moment, everything in me went still. Because I knew, whatever this was, whatever she was lying about, it was big enough to make her drop that box like it burned her. And I was going to find out exactly what kind of fire we were standing in. I didn't go upstairs. Not right away. Instead, I stood over that box like it was a crime scene, my hands at my sides, breathing shallow, brain screaming at me not to touch it. But I did. Of course I did. Curiosity isn't just a weakness, it's a weapon, and in that moment, I needed one. Inside the box, under a layer of velvet so thick it felt theatrical, was a silver key attached to a leather strap. Not a house key. Not car keys. This wasn't everyday access. It was a boutique key, heavy and flat, with a number engraved into the metal. No brand. No instructions. Just a number 413A. And next to it, folded neatly like it belonged to someone who never made mistakes, was a single photograph. Black and white. Taken from a high angle, maybe security footage, maybe not. And in that photo, her. My wife. Sitting at a hotel bar in a dress I'd never seen before, one strap sliding off her shoulder, laughing. Not with Nathan. With someone else. His back to the camera. But her expression? Pure adrenaline. Eyes bright. Mouth open mid-laugh. Her body tilted toward him like gravity didn't apply. And she wasn't wearing her wedding ring. I stared at that photo so long I didn't even realize she'd come back downstairs. Barefoot. Hair tied back like she hadn't just blown up our reality 10 minutes ago. She didn't speak until she was already halfway into the room. You weren't supposed to see that. Her voice was flat. Not apologetic. Not ashamed. Just annoyed. I turned the photo toward her, careful not to speak yet. I wanted her to fill the silence. To see what she'd say when the script fell apart. Why do you have this? I asked, quiet but direct. She shrugged. Like I'd caught her borrowing a coat. Not cheating. It's not what it looks like. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because that phrase should be trademarked at this point. Then what is it? She crossed her arms. Not defensive. Just bored. Drop it, Mark. It's over. It was never serious. I stared at her. The audacity. The gall. You're telling me this is casual? I held up the key. This is what? Some kind of loyalty card for liars? Don't be dramatic. That was the moment something inside me moved. Not broke. Just shifted. Like a lock turning. I set the box down gently, walked past her without another word, and went to the guest room. She didn't follow. Didn't ask me to come back. She just let me go, like it was all routine. And that's what scared me the most. How easily she let it happen. But I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, fingers twitching with the image of that photo burned into my skull. I replayed the moment she saw the gift, the way she dropped it, not because it surprised her, but because it exposed her. It wasn't the object. It was the reminder. Whatever the key unlocked, it held leverage. And Nathan knew it. And so did she. By morning, she was gone. Not gone. Just out like nothing had happened. No note. No message. Like she expected me to be fine. Like she thought I'd sit and stew until I forgot the taste of what I'd seen. But I'm not that man. Not anymore. I spent the next hour on my laptop. And by noon, I knew exactly where the key went. Unit 413A, Eastside Storage. Restricted access. Private suites. No cameras. Which meant whatever was inside wasn't meant to be watched. And I was going to find out what was hiding behind that lock. Eastside Storage looked like nothing. Just a blank concrete shell on the edge of a business district that forgot it used to be something. Faded signage. Rust on the gates. The kind of place you pass 100 times without ever noticing it. But someone had paid a lot of money to keep one unit hidden inside. Unit 413A. The woman at the front desk barely looked up when I walked in. I showed her the key, half expecting her to call security or ask for ID. She didn't. Just glanced at the number, then handed me a clipboard without a word. A signature, a nod, and she turned away like it wasn't her job to care what was behind that steel door. The hallway was cold, unnaturally so. Every footstep felt loud. And as I walked toward the unit, something tightened in my chest. Not fear. Anticipation. Like walking toward the edge of a stage, knowing the curtain's about to lift on a play no one wants to admit they're starring in. The key turned smoothly. No resistance. No creak. Just a soft click and the door rolled open. And there it was. A room set up like a second life. Not a storage unit. A living space. No windows, but everything else, lights, furniture, even a mini fridge humming softly in the corner. Clean. Organized. Too precise. There were clothes, hers folded on a low bench. A toothbrush. Perfume. A second pair of heels lined up next to an unfamiliar jacket, clearly a man's, tossed carelessly over a leather armchair. And on the table, a notebook. I opened it slowly, heart hammering like it was trying to outrun what I was about to read. Dates. Times. Locations. Notes written in her handwriting. Tuesday 6 p.m., room 607. Ask Nathan re blackout window. Keep burner off after use. Pages and pages of plans. Coordinated schedules. Notes about who would be where, when. Pseudonyms. Hotel names. At the bottom of one page, written in red ink, don't let Mark see this. Ever. The silence in that room felt alive. I could hear myself breathing, could feel the way my fingers started trembling as I flipped to the last page. There was a photo clip to it. A candid. Me. In our kitchen. Taken from outside the window. I'm laughing at something, holding a mug, probably one of the mornings I made her coffee while she was getting ready for work. Underneath, one line in all caps, he still doesn't know. Keep it that way. I stood there for a long time. Not crying. Not shouting. Just frozen in a kind of stillness I didn't know I was capable of. This wasn't just a fling. This was an operation. This was a double life with coordination, code, and strategy. And I'd been nothing but a detail, a variable to be managed. When I finally left the unit, I didn't take anything. Not the book. Not the photo. Not the proof. Because I didn't need it anymore. She'd already signed her name at the bottom of the script. The performance was over. I drove home on autopilot. Didn't turn on music. Didn't call anyone. Just silence. Heavy and full. When I walked through the door, she was in the living room. Legs crossed. Sipping tea like the world hadn't shifted under our feet. She looked up. "Where were you?" she asked casual. I stared at her for a beat too long. Just enough for her to feel it. Then I said, "Tell me who he is." Her smile faltered. "Who?" "The one who isn't Nathan." That hit her like a slap. She didn't flinch, not visibly. But her fingers tightened around the mug. Her eyes narrowed just enough to betray her. "I don't know what you're talking about." Flat, sharp, immediate. I didn't blink. I saw the unit. Silence. Then, a pause, followed by the tiniest shake of her head. "I told you not to go looking." There it was. Not regret. Not guilt. Just control slipping. I stepped closer. "You had a notebook. You planned around me like I was a traffic light. Who is he?" She stood up, slow and deliberate. Walked past me to the hallway like the conversation bored her. "You want to know so badly? Fine. But you won't like the answer." I followed. And when she turned around at the stairs, her face was calm. Too calm. "He's not the problem, Mark. You are. You started slipping. You became predictable. I needed something real. Something real." That's what she called betrayal. She walked up the stairs without another word. And I stood there, wondering if I'd just witnessed the truth or another performance. I didn't follow her up the stairs. She wanted that for me to chase her, demand more, spin out so she could play the calm, rational one. She always played the long game when cornered. Let you shout, let you rage, and then flip the moment like it was your tantrum that killed the conversation. So I waited. She came back down 15 minutes later, changed into one of those soft lounge sets she wears when she's pretending everything's fine. Hair brushed, makeup off, eyes hollow. She thought she was ready to face me. She wasn't. I was sitting at the kitchen island, the one we used to talk at every Sunday morning with scrambled eggs and playlists and dumb jokes. Now I couldn't even look at it without feeling sick. She leaned against the counter like she was starring in some fake domestic ad. "If you want to scream," she said, "just get it over with." I didn't move. "I'm not going to scream," I said. "I'm going to ask one more time." Her lips tightened, but she didn't speak. "Who is he?" She stared at me and something passed across her face. Not hesitation. Not fear. Calculation. And then she said it. "He's my husband." For a moment, I didn't understand. The words hit me like a foreign language. Then my chest locked up. "You're what?" She looked at me with something close to pity. Or maybe satisfaction. "We got married 2 years ago. Out of state. Different name. Different documents. It's not legally binding, not in the strictest sense. But emotionally? It's more real than whatever this has been." I didn't breathe. Couldn't. "You married another man? While you were married to me?" She nodded. No shame. No apology. Just facts, cold and sharp like broken glass. "You started fading, Mark. I needed more than a man who just showed up. You think presence is love? You think loyalty replaces passion?" She stepped closer. Her voice didn't rise, but her words hit like fists. I had to split myself in two just to survive this house. He gave me everything you stopped giving me years ago. Curiosity, fire, purpose. I stood, chair scraping behind me. And what was I then? I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. A roommate? A front? A safety net? You were stability, she said, like it was a compliment. That's not a role, that's an excuse. She crossed her arms, eyes burning now. You never asked what I wanted. You just assumed I was happy because I didn't complain. I assumed you were honest because you didn't lie to my face. That hit her. Briefly. But only briefly. She shrugged. Maybe I lied to protect you. Or maybe I lied because you couldn't handle the truth. I stepped toward her, not out of anger, out of disbelief. I would have forgiven almost anything. If you told me. If you just said something. That's the difference between you and him, she said quietly. He doesn't need to be begged to see me. My hands shook. Is Nathan in on it? She hesitated, then nodded. Of course he is. They're friends. Jesus Christ, don't be dramatic. You're acting like this is some twisted conspiracy. It is. No, she said. It's evolution. And right then, in that moment, I saw the full picture. Nathan wasn't just her boss. He was the handler, the gatekeeper, the facilitator. This wasn't just an affair. It was a structure, a system. She'd built a whole network around betraying me. Friends who lied for her. A second identity. And a second marriage. I backed away. This ends tonight, I said. You're going to tell him, both of them, it's over. She laughed. Actually laughed. You think you're in control of this? That's cute. I stared at her. No, I'm not in control. Not yet. She tilted her head, mocking. What does that mean? I smiled, cold and real. It means I'm not playing your game anymore. I'm flipping the board. And I walked out. Not to think. Not to calm down. But to make a plan. Because whatever she thought she was controlling, she just lost it. And I wasn't going to give her a second chance to twist the knife. I didn't go to a friend's place. Didn't sit in the car crying or drive aimlessly like some lost puppy trying to make sense of it all. That part of me had already been incinerated. There's a version of betrayal that doesn't hurt anymore, it just sharpens. And I was sharp now. First thing I did was cancel all the joint cards. Every account. Gone. Online access revoked. Credit limits nuked. Anything with my name, my income, my protection cut off like dead weight. She didn't get to walk through our life using my resources as a red carpet to someone else's kingdom. Then I made 3 calls. First, a lawyer. Quiet, expensive, discreet. The kind that doesn't ask questions like, are you sure? Just, how fast do you want this done? Second, my HR director. Told her I'd be stepping back for a few days. Family emergency. She offered time. I asked her for privacy. Third, a locksmith. By the time I returned home the next morning, everything had changed. The locks were new. The garage code was mine alone. Her name was scrubbed from every access point right down to the smart thermostat. She was in the kitchen when I came in. Hair still damp from a shower. Wearing my shirt. My goddamn shirt. Where were you? She asked, as if it mattered. I held up a manila envelope and tossed it onto the counter. She didn't open it right away. Just stared at it like she already knew what was inside. Divorce papers? She said flatly. No, I replied. That comes later. Those are documents for the bank. You're no longer listed on any of my accounts. She blinked once. Then again. But still no reaction. Just an adjustment. Her fingers gripped the edge of the island slightly tighter. You're overreacting. No, I said calmly. I'm finally reacting. She tried again. You don't need to do this. We can talk. Work through it like adults. I laughed. Once. Sharp and brief. You think this is about healing? She tilted her head mockingly. What is it about then? I stepped closer. It's about exposure. It's about making sure the version of you that walks out of this house is the one the world finally sees. Her jaw clenched. You wouldn't. I already did. She opened the envelope. Inside, photocopies of her journal from the unit. A copy of the photograph. A copy of our marriage certificate, highlighted, time-stamped. And on top of that, A copy of the prenup she thought I'd forgotten we signed 6 years ago, the one that kicks in if she cheats. I told you, I said. I'm not flipping the pieces. I'm flipping the board. She slammed the folder shut. What do you want from me? You want me to beg? You want me to confess? Fine. I cheated. I built something you weren't part of. I lied to your face for years and smiled while doing it. Her voice cracked then. Not from sorrow. From ego breaking under pressure. But guess what? I don't regret it. There it was. The final dagger. But it didn't land. Not anymore. I stepped back. You don't have to regret it. You just have to live with the consequences. She opened her mouth to speak, to argue, to claw at control. But before she could, the doorbell rang. I didn't flinch. She looked at me. Who is that? Lawyer. You're serious? Yes. And you think this makes you strong? No, I said, moving past her. This makes me free. And I walked to the door, not just to open it, but to step into the next phase of my life. One where I wasn't the one being deceived. One where I controlled the exits. And I had just locked every single one behind her. The lawyer stayed for 42 minutes. He didn't ask much. Just walked me through what was already in motion, the financial lockdown, the asset freeze, the preliminary petition with breach of fidelity clearly documented in bold. He was precise, surgical. The kind of person who'd make even a clean wound feel like a dissection. She didn't come downstairs once, but I knew she was listening. Every word echoed through the vents of this house like a siren. Every signature I scrawled, every confirmation I whispered was another nail in the coffin of the life she thought she controlled. After he left, silence blanketed the house. Thick, tense, the kind that makes you feel like you're breathing through fabric. I went to the kitchen to make coffee. A small, deliberate act of ownership, reclaiming something simple. But the moment the mug hit the counter, she appeared silent, barefoot, unblinking. Is this what you want? She asked, voice low. Not a plea. Not a challenge. Something colder. Yes. Everything burned? Only what you lit first. She walked closer, slow, like a tiger deciding whether to pounce or walk away. I thought I meant something to you. You did, I said. But so did the truth. And you killed that first. She leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, like she was measuring something behind her eyes. Okay, she said. Then let me show you the rest. I blinked. The rest? You think you've uncovered the full betrayal? You haven't even scratched it. She wasn't bluffing. I could feel it in the way she looked at me, like a woman with one grenade left and no intention of walking away quietly. What more could there possibly be? She smiled, faint and sharp. You've been so busy playing detective. You didn't stop to consider that you weren't the only one being lied to. I don't follow. She moved past me, grabbed her phone from the counter, and pulled up a folder. Clicked, swiped, then turned it around. Photos, screenshots, text threads, voice messages. From Nathan to someone else. Another woman. Multiple women. Your big bad boss villain? She said, almost amused. He's been feeding lies to everyone. Me, them, probably you too. I stared at the screen. Not because I was surprised, but because the game had just fractured again. She kept going. I wasn't the only one manipulated, Mark. He's been building a web. He's the one who convinced me I deserved more. That you were holding me back. That this marriage was a cocoon. And maybe I believed it because I wanted to. But now, she laughed bitter, dry. Now I know I was just another pawn. Just like you. I didn't answer right away. The air between us was loaded with too many angles, too many timelines crossing in a single second. So you're saying you were a victim now? No, she said. I'm saying we both were. But only one of us figured it out in time. There was something real in her voice now. Not regret. Not remorse. Recognition. Of damage done. Of lies fed. Of power stolen. But also of the war still left to fight. I'm not helping you, I said quietly. Whatever revenge you're trying to piece together, you're on your own. I'm not asking for help, she replied. I'm warning you. About what? She looked me dead in the eyes. Nathan doesn't like being cornered. Then she walked out. No shoes, no bag, just her phone and whatever storm she was walking into. And as the door clicked shut behind her, I realized something terrifying. I might have been done with her, but the game wasn't done with me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was haunted, not even because of her warnings, but because I finally understood I hadn't been playing a game of marriage. I'd been enrolled in a program, and Nathan Cole was its architect. I sat in the office until sunrise, scrolling through her screenshots, the text threads, the voice memos she'd left behind like breadcrumbs. My wife wasn't wrong. Nathan had been busy. Too busy for this to be just flirtation or abuse of power. The texts weren't romantic. They were logistical, tactical. Conversations about timing, people, messaging, risk. Don't let her suspect anything until I've met the board. She still thinks she's the only one. Handle that. Use the box. If she cracks, let it happen in public. Control the fallout. He wasn't managing relationships. He was orchestrating breakdowns. My skin crawled. This wasn't about one affair or two. It was about disruption. Manipulation at a level that was corporate, psychological, and deeply personal. He didn't just seduce people. He destabilized them. My wife was just one of many puppets hung from the same string, all convinced they were his favorite marionette. And I had been standing at the edge of the stage, clapping along, thinking it was real. At 9:12 a.m. I made my first move. I called Nathan's office. Pretended to be someone interested in a consult. His company had recently expanded into private coaching, a vague term used to mask whatever the hell they were actually doing. I was told he only took in-person appointments. Exclusivity breeds clarity, the assistant said, like she was quoting scripture. Fine. I booked a session. Under a different name. He was available the next day. And for the first time in days, I smiled. Because now finally, I was walking into his territory, not blind, not weak, but fully awake. The next morning, I dressed like someone else. Not like me. Something tailored. Confident. I didn't want him to see a wounded husband. I wanted him to see a man with a reason. I arrived at the address, a penthouse suite with tinted windows and a private elevator. The receptionist greeted me like I was old money. Nathan's reach was deeper than I imagined, not just a corporate predator, but a social chameleon. When he walked into the room, everything clicked. The grin. The perfect watch. The unbothered posture. He extended his hand like we were college friends meeting after years apart. You must be Mr. Keller, he said. Right on time. I shook his hand. Firm. Neutral. Thanks for seeing me. Of course. Always a pleasure to meet men looking to improve themselves. He gestured toward 2 leather chairs. Sat across from me, no desk between us. Just openness. Vulnerability disguised as design. So, he said, what can I help you with? I leaned back. Let's talk about your gift. Something flickered in his eyes. Subtle. A recalibration. Gift? The one you gave my wife. Stillness. Then a slow, professional smile. I give many gifts, Mr. Keller. You gave her a key to Unit 413A. You also gave her a life that didn't include me. And now I think you're going to explain why. He didn't blink. Just studied me. You're her husband. I nodded. You're a lot calmer than I expected. I'm not here to shout. I'm here to understand. Because something tells me she wasn't the first. And I don't think she'll be the last. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Still smiling, but now with something sharper behind his teeth. You really want to understand? I do. He lowered his voice, almost conspiratorial. People like your wife, they're waiting to be released. Caged by men who mistake presence for intimacy. They don't want loyalty. They want impact. I give them a way out. You engineer the exit. He shrugged. I offer clarity. They make the jump. And what do you get? His smile widened. I get to be the last face they see before they become who they were always meant to be. I stared at him. You don't love them. No, he said. I elevate them. Do they know they're one of many? They don't need to. And there it was. The poison. Cold. Perfectly mixed. Beautifully administered. Nathan Cole wasn't breaking marriages. He was crafting converts. Believers. I stood slowly, buttoned my jacket. He didn't stop me. Will I see you again? He asked, not mockingly, just curious. Probably not, I said. He tilted his head. Pity. You're smarter than the others. I could have used you. I didn't answer. I walked out of that room and into the elevator, knowing exactly what I had to do next. Because this wasn't just about ending a marriage anymore. It was about ending a system. I didn't go home after leaving Nathan's suite. Instead, I drove to a parking lot behind a library 2 towns over, pulled out my laptop, and began writing. Not emails, not texts, a report. Not for the police, not yet, but for someone with just as much reach, Nathan's board of directors. Because if there's one thing predators like Nathan hate more than exposure, it's consequences wrapped in public relations fallout. This wasn't about catching him in a moral act. This was about cutting the legs out from under him using the very structure he thought made him untouchable. I laid it out in chronological order, names, first initials only, but enough to rattle. Screenshots of messages with metadata timestamps preserved. The contents of the storage unit. A description of the coaching sessions that doubled as emotional weaponization. Her words. My wife's exact quotes. Her own confession recorded without her knowing when she told me he orchestrated it all. But the gem? The photograph. That black and white photo of her at the hotel bar, laughing with the man whose face was never visible. It wasn't until I revisited the notebook from the storage unit that I realized something. The date written in the margins? It matched Nathan's conference weekend. And then I looked again. The man in the picture, slight build, wedding ring, neatly dressed, wasn't some fling. It was Nathan's brother, the man who'd been helping fund his expansion. I dug deeper. Social media? Old posts. Background check files from a service I'd never thought I'd need. And there he was, same jacket, same watch. Confirmed. So that was the real game. He wasn't just seducing women for fun. He was testing them. Watching how far they'd go, who they'd betray, what they'd sacrifice, even family. This wasn't about love or passion. It was about leverage. He created scenarios, planted ideas, broke loyalties, and recorded every moment of it. If anyone ever crossed him, he already had the blackmail in his pocket. The women thought they were free. They were just upgraded prisoners. And she, my wife, was one of the few who figured it out too late. Now, I had the map, and I knew exactly where to drop the grenade. I encrypted the report, sent it to 3 people, a board member tied to public funding, a reporter I used to know back in college who now worked investigations for a national business outlet, myself in 5 separate cloud storage backups in case anyone tried to bury it. Then I waited. 6 hours later, my wife called. I didn't answer. She called again. Still no. Then a text came through. He knows. What did you do? Then, he's unraveling. You need to be careful. I stared at the screen. Not in fear. Not anymore. Then I typed back. 1 line. It's his turn to feel fire. Because that was what this had always been about, right? They thought they were playing with matches. But I'd brought the gasoline. By the next morning, the news had teeth. It started as a ripple. A 2-paragraph article buried on page 6 of a business blog, hinting at unethical conduct inside a leadership consultancy firm. No names yet. No damage. Just smoke. But smoke always finds fire. By noon, the ripple became a wave. The reporter I'd contacted hadn't just published the story, she'd started connecting dots I hadn't even drawn. Former clients came forward anonymously, some with NDA redactions, all whispering the same thing: emotional manipulation, power imbalance, psychological grooming disguised as performance coaching. Then came the thread that set everything on fire. A former associate, probably someone Nathan thought he had under control, posted a 19-tweet expose outlining years of private retreats, hush payments, and transformative partnerships that were really just power tests disguised as mentorships. She ended the thread with, "You think he was helping you grow? He was watching how far you'd fall." Within an hour, Nathan's name was trending. Not in admiration, in reckoning. And that's when my phone rang again. Her. I picked up this time. Not to talk. To listen. "What did you do?" she hissed, skipping any pleasantries. "I just told the truth." "You don't get it, Mark. He's dangerous." "Not anymore. He has connections. You think you're the first to try and burn him?" "No," I said. "But I'm the first to enjoy it." She was silent for a moment. Then, "He's spiraling. He's already threatening people. You didn't just blow this up. You exposed everyone tied to him. You mean you? She didn't answer. I continued, I'm not saving you from this. I don't want saving. Then why are you calling me? And then her voice cracked. The tiniest fracture. Because I think he's coming for me next. And there it was. The empire she helped him build, the system she swore made her feel seen, was now turning on her. I waited a beat. You should run, I said. I can't, she whispered. Then hide. Then I hung up. Because I meant it. This wasn't about her anymore. She chose her side. She picked her path. And now, she'd get to see what it felt like when the man she gave everything to had nothing left to protect. Not even her. By that evening, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Nathan's voice was calm, measured, but behind every word was a man on the edge. You think this is over? You think exposure ends me? I built men like you in my sleep. You're just a crack in the floor. I'll step over you. Click. I saved the message, then forwarded it to the reporter. Let him keep talking. Let him keep digging his own grave. The next day, his firm issued a press release. Nathan Cole has stepped down, effective immediately. But it was too late. The structure was already caving in. And beneath the rubble, all the ghosts he made, all the lies he told, all the women he controlled, and me walking away from it all without a single burn. Because I didn't come to fight fair. I came to end the war. 3 weeks later, the world forgot Nathan Cole. He faded from the headlines like old blood in water, visible only to those who knew where to look. His firm collapsed within days of his resignation, swallowed by lawsuits and internal mutinies. Former clients turned state witnesses. Funding dried up. Leases were broken. Names were named. And somewhere in the wreckage he disappeared. No arrest. No court date. Just gone. The predator slithered back underground, or maybe was pulled there by forces nastier than truth. I didn't care. He wasn't mine to chase anymore. She moved out 2 days after the collapse. No big speech. No parting plea. Just a suitcase, her keys on the counter, and a final glance that didn't land. She looked tired. Not broken. Not ruined. Just tired. I didn't ask where she was going. She didn't offer. And honestly, that was the first real honesty we'd shared in months. The papers were signed in silence. No lawyers. No meetings. Just signatures. Pages traded through a third party. Done. Quiet. Surgical. After it was finalized, I found myself standing in the hallway, the same hallway where she used to leave her heels, the same spot where that damn birthday party began. For a moment, I thought I'd feel some poetic ache. That maybe closure would look like a breakdown. But there was nothing. Just air. Clear. Still. The photo of her, the black and white one, I burned it. Not in rage. Not in ceremony. Just in a metal dish in the backyard, watching the corners curl into ash. I didn't want to save it. Didn't want to look at it 10 years from now and feel that old weight again. She can keep the lies. Nathan can keep the ghosts. I kept me. The real me, the one who doesn't ignore the itch in his gut when something's off. The one who doesn't smile through betrayal. The one who doesn't hold on to someone just because they once called him home. A month later, I opened a new account. No joint anything. No shared passwords. No second toothbrush in the bathroom. It's not loneliness. It's space. Space to breathe. To rebuild. To choose again, not just someone else, but me again. And if you're reading this, thinking about whether or not to follow your gut, whether the late-night phone checking, the careful questions, the way they flinch when confronted means something, it does. It always does. Don't wait for them to drop the box. You already know it burns.